Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum students and viewers. Today our lecture is on poets of early Victorian period, and as you know that it is our routine to have a recap of our earlier lectures. So we will start our lectures from the knowledge, from the discussion that we had made earlier. We had already learned that the phrases, the two phrases that we had learned earlier, which were in vogue in Romantic era, has become defunct. One of these phrases was, poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful emotion. Such sort of thing is missing in this literature, in the literature of Victorian period. And we next see that the poetry, drama, novel, etc., whatever the thing had been produced in early Victorian period or later Victorian period, in this era we find reason on the basis of observation, on the basis of scientific research was dominant. And today our topic is poets of early Victorian period. As we had already conveyed and discussed to all of you viewers, that there were the most important poets of this period. Number one, Alfred Tennyson, Robert Browning, and Matthew Arnold. At first we decide to discuss Alfred Tennyson. Alfred Tennyson was born in 1809. This was the period of the critical period in which the scientific research has been propping up. This is also the year in which we find Charles Darwin also took birth. He was born also in 1809. This was also the period in which Charles Darwin had presented his famous theory in which he said that survival is always for the fittest, and the person who struggles always survives. So this was the naturalistic theory in which, though he had given his idea about the animals, biologist as he was, but this was also been coincided on the people of that area. As we had already conveyed that this was the period in which materialistic approach and the approach in which the material gains are the most important ones, we find that Alfred Tennyson's poetry had always been in the forefront in reflecting the characteristics of that period. Although from his childhood, Alfred Tennyson started writing poetry, and his first poem, it is said, that is of epic nature, and it had 6,000 lines. And in his poems, having 2 volumes, was published 1842 and is considered to be the first ever volume which reflects all the characteristics of early Victorian period. It was the period of the conflict between faith and science that always stresses upon the need of observation, and on the basis of the observation the reality and the facts are derived. So this has been reflected in his poem In Memoriam. In the poem In Memoriam, instead of throwing light on the inclinations of the heart, he shuns it completely and takes the path of reality, takes the path of realism, which was dominant, which was prevalent in that time. Next, as we had said, that it was the period of material gains, particularly the youth of England, that is also called in a phrase Young England. Young England were also behind attaining material gains. These material gains, though are temporary in nature, and they had nothing to do with the things that are culturally high, that are religiously high. So if the things if the things are against the religious norms, Christian norms, they are not taken care of. What was the most important? The most important thing was material gains. Okay, so in this connection, he wrote Locksley Hall. This is also the poem, and in this poem, we find the young England was behind attaining material gains. Next, he wrote The Princess. In The Princess, he wrote about the most important topic at that time, which was the higher education for women. So what was the need of the hour? He reflected it in his poetry. Next, he wrote Maud. This was the period in which the Crimean War was fought. In the Crimean War, there was Russia and his allies on the one hand, and France, England, and other countries were on the other. So these two groups fought each other in the Crimean War, and luckily, France, England, and other countries won the war, and Russia licked the dust. So in this connection, in this backdrop, we find Maud discussing the patriotic mood, arousing the patriotic mood in the readers. So what was the need of the hour was that to arouse the patriotism in the youth of England. So that he had done at a very optimum level. So guys and girls, today we were discussing about the poets of early Victorian period, and to make our lectures very short so that there might be the inculcation of knowledge in your minds, there might be the assimilation of lectures and knowledge and learning in your mind, I have made it very short. So learn it extraordinarily, never go behind, always learn, and always listen to the lecture very carefully. Remember that one thing is quite important. If you think that something is missing in my lecture, if you think that something might be explained more, you must write it to me. I shall struggle very hard. I shall try very candidly to explain the questions that you put to me, that you pose to me. Thank you very much. Allah Hafiz.